Almost all military conflicts in colonial North America revolved around land, trade, natural resources and power. Ultimately, these desires led to nearly 75 years of war between England, France, Spain and the Netherlands in North America and around the world. The French began exploring the St. Lawrence River in the 1500s. Fur could be sold in Europe for a high price. They began hunting for fur, such as beaver pelts, that was used to make clothing and felt. The French allied with American Indians in the fur trade. Indians traded furs with Europeans for goods such as tools and firearms. The French and English governments established fur trading companies near Quebec, a region of northeast Canada. These companies sought regional monopolies that provided a country with exclusive rights to trade in the region. France and Britain's competition for control of the fur trade ignited larger conflicts. King William's War was the first major North American conflict between the French and English. It was the result of the War of the League of Augsburg in Europe. The colonies were seen as a less important part of this conflict. Only a small number of French and British troops went to North America. The fighting was mostly led by colonial troops who partnered with American Indian tribes. New France aligned itself with the Wabanaki. New England aligned itself with the Iroquois. Fighting began in 1689 along the French-controlled border of Acadia and the English-controlled border of New England. The French and the Wabanaki launched attacks against the New Englanders. They executed a bloody attack on Schenectady, New York in 1690. It was winter and the English did not expect it. Many English colonists were killed or taken captive. The English were not always on the defensive, though. During the 1690 Battle of Port Royal, they destroyed a French fort and took the French governor captive. The war ended in 1697, but the treaty did little to settle the land disputes between the colonies. 5 years after King William's War, Queen Anne's War began. It was the second North American conflict. Again, this war started in Europe. This time it was the result of the War of Spanish Succession. The British declared war against Spain and France in 1702 to prevent a union between the two countries after the Spanish monarch died. In the north, the British colonists fought the French in Acadia, which included Nova Scotia. Deerfield, Massachusetts, was the site of the bloodiest battle of this war. French troops and their American Indian allies burned the town to the ground. About 50 townspeople were killed. England's greatest success against the French occurred a few years later when it captured Port Royal. That ended French control of Acadia. Britain sought to add Florida and the Caribbean to its trade network. This led to fighting with the Spanish in those areas. The British took control of the Spanish colony, St. Augustine, but were unable to hold it to the end of the war. Many of Florida's American Indians were killed in the conflict. The Treaty of Utrecht ended Queen Anne's War in 1713. The British gained control of Hudson Bay, Acadia, and Newfoundland. France retained control of the islands of the St. Lawrence River. France also recognized that the Iroquois fell under the protection of the British. The War of the Austrian Succession began in 1740. It was a dispute about the rightful heir to the Austrian throne. Alliances with other European countries dragged Britain into this large war against France. The European conflict spread to North America in 1744. It was called King George's War. The most significant battle of King George's War took place at Louisbourg. Louisbourg was the capital of Cape Breton, Canada. The French-controlled fort provided access to the St. Lawrence River. In 1745, British forces took the French fort after a 6-week siege. This enabled British forces to move further into Canada. British occupation at Louisbourg did not last long. At the end of the war in 1748, the British returned Louisbourg. France gave Britain control of Madras, India, in return. British colonists who had fought to win the fort were furious at the decision to return it to the French. Great Britain's 13 colonies controlled much of North America's eastern coast. France controlled the land from present-day Louisiana to Canada. The borders between these territories were never clearly established. Colonists on both sides tried to push their way into the other's territory. This caused tensions. Ohio country created the greatest dispute. The land was valuable for fur, agriculture, and transportation. This border dispute between France and Britain started the French and Indian War in 1754. This war would be fought on 3 different continents.